Good evening, everybody. This is yours truly, Jasmine D. Millhouse. I hope you all can hear me good. Look, I had to bring in my tea tonight because it's fall in love. Because tonight the tea is finna be getting dropped. All right. If you have not been following me the last few weeks, I don't know what you've been doing with your life, but welcome. Nonetheless, I am yours truly, the CEO and founder of Purpose to Fly, where the fly stands for First Love You. And I love November. Why? Because it is National Entrepreneur Month. And I here on Facebook, I have a show called the National Entrepreneur Month Show. This is my fourth annual season, as you would call it. Just put that out there, because it's going to be an annual thing, as you all see it. And I am so super excited about tonight's interview. I told y'all I got my tea, my little chamomile, and my little lavender, because when it's time to sip the tea, you better take you a sip, all right? Because tonight we are going to be diving deep into something that we all have been experiencing, not just within the pandemic, not just within the last 60 days, but for our entire lives. And it is a topic that is so taboo that we don't talk about, we don't like to discuss, we don't like to get into, we don't like to think about it. And that topic is grief. And I have the grief expert herself. She gives a fresh new perspective on how to deal with and work through your grief. So if you're going through a season, if you are going through a moment where you are grieving, whether it's from a loss of a job, a loss of a car, if you just broke up with that boo thing because it's the holidays, you know how they do. They'll get you every time because they don't want to buy no Christmas gift. We're going to talk about it a little later. If you are going through any of that, make sure you tune in with us tonight because you do not want to miss it. Tag your friends, tag your family, share this on your page, share this in your groups. If you have anywhere to share it on, we're live on YouTube. We are live here on Facebook. Share, tag, and tag, and tag. All right. So before I bring up my guest for tonight, I'm going to give you just a little snippet of her bio. When I tell you this bio is extensive, y'all, because baby, listen, she got the credentials to back up her name, okay? And I ain't talking about them elemental P letters. I'm talking about experience and research and knowledge that she has applied within her own life. And she is here to help us do the same. And I'm super excited about this interview. You've seen her before. She is none other than the host and the CEO of This Too Shall Suck podcast that is airing in over 37 countries. And if it ain't, we gonna speak that in now. We gonna plug that. If it ain't 37 countries, I just made them up. So y'all better get to creating some lands and buying some cities around here. All right. So without further ado, Miss Loryn Wellman, she is the creator and host of This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief. About Loryn, Loryn, aka LD, is what I like to call her. So if you hear me say Lolo, don't judge me, judge yourself. All right. She is a grief advocate who uses her own experiences to create meaningful conversations around grief. After losing both of her parents to cancer, all before the age of 32, she became acquainted with grief very quickly, and she knew she was in store for a long road ahead. In her grieving journey, she noticed there were a plethora, come on, big word, a plethora of resources on grieving the death of a loved one, but not grief as a whole. And she also noticed that there was no one that looked like, sounded like, or was her age discussing this taboo topic. Enter This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief. Weekly episodes exploring the different avenues of grief through the eyes of a millennial. Loryn's bubbly personality, strong faith, and positive outlook on life has allowed her to create a safe space for open, candid, transparent, and raw conversations on grief like you have never heard before. This Too Shall Suck podcast discusses the different avenues of grief from a lighter perspective and is changing the discussion around it one conversation at a time. Right? So if you are ready, make sure you buckle your seatbelts, pull your oxygen mask down, put it on yourself first, as they say in the airlines. Make sure you protect you first because you can't help anyone else unless you're safe. All right? Amen. Without further ado, I would like to bring up none other than yours truly, Miss Loryn Wellman. Good
Hey,
evening.
girl.
How you doing?
You so weird.
Hello.
Hey, girl.
Good evening,
Can you
ma'am.
hear me okay? What they say? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you good and good. If y'all can
Good.
hear her, make sure y'all let us know in the comments that you can hear her. Also, I'm one or two questions. One or two. If you got a question, grief wise, put it in the comments because we may have a moment in this interview for a quick Q&A. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And I also may throw it in while we're talking because you never know. So if you have a question on grief, know someone that's grieving right now. As we all know, the world has been hit today alone in the city of Memphis. So
Right.
if you have questions, concerns, put it in the chat because we are here tonight for this specific topic. All
Yeah.
right. Grief as a whole. All right. So, with looking at the different perspective of grief, losing your parents in such a quick span of time, one
Mm-hmm.
behind the other. What was your mindset like going through those times?
Woo wee. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for having me on. Thank you. I love being here. I love that you do this. I love that you highlight entrepreneurship. So shout out to you. Come on, T. I'm so mad I forgot my teacup. So I
Because
want to say
we do
that
too, girl.
we love some good tea. So thank you for that. And number two, that bio is out of date because now we're in 43 countries. So you know what I'm saying. So I was like, oh, I gotta update that. So yeah. So God,
Ooh,
thank you. So
ooh, God, we thank you.
oh God, we thank you, as Auntie Tab would say. But back to the topic.
Did you freeze? Did she freeze? Oh no, no freeze. Okay, so while we wait on her to come back, congratulations to Miss Loryn on now being in over 43 countries for This Too Shall Suck podcast. Shout out and congratulations to her while we wait for her to come back in here. So I'm going to drop her down, and as she comes back, I will make sure I bring her back up. So while I wait on her to come back through, I hope you all are tagging. I hope you all are sharing. I hope you're liking. Get someone in the comments because, again, we are going to be talking about we're going to be discussing the topic of grief. And grief can be looked at in so many different ways. You have the loss of a loved one, you have the loss of an animal, the loss of clothing, your home, your vehicle, your job, your mind, your body. We're both in a 90-day transformation, and it can wreak havoc on your mindset. It can wreak havoc with the things that you're going through. It can wreak havoc. Hold on one second. My bad, y'all. I had to drop off real quick to make sure Miss Loryn was able to get back in. So while we're waiting on her, just like I was saying, you have when you go through weight loss, sometimes going through a weight loss journey, when you see your body transform from one one thing to another, it plays a lot on you mentally. You have people out here doing body weight, like weight loss surgery, people that are working out, eating healthier, and they're seeing their body go from one thing that they were used to for such a long time, and now it is totally different. So it's like, I don't know how to act in this way. You know how they say, don't talk to me when I get a flat stomach, or don't talk to me when you see my body like this, because I'm gonna act this kind of way. Sometimes it doesn't go that way. We may think that we'll have all the confidence in the world, but sometimes it does not go that way. Sometimes we have to look at, okay, I just lost so much. I just lost, different things. And I think we got Miss Loryn back up here. So let me go ahead and tune in, because look, I ain't been look, she the grief advocate, okay? I talk about how to first love you. So give me 2 seconds. Wait a minute. All right, let me see. There you
I'm
go.
so sorry. You know
You're
what I
fine.
grieve? Technology. That's what I grieve is technology
Talk
on a
about it.
daily basis. My
Listen,
gosh. I'm like, can you
listen.
not? Sorry, guys.
And
We're
we're
back.
back.
We're back.
And we're back.
Hair floofing and all. We're back.
That part.
Sorry.
So, okay, so what I was asking, my question was, in such that a short span of time, losing both of your parents,
Mm-hmm.
what was your mindset like going through that?
So with my mom, I can't confidently say to you that I process grief. I can't stand here knowing what I know now about grief, saying that I confidently processed it, right? So with my mom, I kind of just moved through life and didn't allow those feelings to come in, and didn't allow grief to come in, and allow myself to move through those emotions. I just kind of suppressed them by
Mm-hmm.
doing, a lot of kind of unhealthy coping mechanisms, drinking, having sex, all of those different things. And really didn't, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know really
Mm-hmm.
how to feel, because, right, like, who has conversations about grief in their home, right? Who has conversations about grief at all?
Right.
And so, that kind of helping with my mom. And then with my dad, again, hey, Pierce, in 2019, when it happened, it was like, oh, you have to face this, because it happened right before the holiday. So he passed
Right.
away August 27th, 2019. And at that time, I was also in school. So I had just graduated. So I had like a really kind of tizzy of different emotions of like,
Mm-hmm.
I should be excited, but I can't, because the day that I'm supposed to have my graduation party is the day I buried my dad, right? So like all of that's happening. And so then, insert here comes the holidays. So now I got acquainted with grief really, really quickly. It was like holidays, Loryn, grief. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, what is this feeling? And I
Mm-hmm.
recognized in that moment that you can't do this on your own. Like, you do not have the tools necessary, and you are not equipped to be able to process this on your own, because you've never had a conversation about it. No one around you knows how to process it. And when I have enough self-awareness to know when I can't do things on my own, because
Mm-hmm.
I was lashing out at my friends, you know what I mean? Like, getting mad at them because they weren't coming around, but I wasn't vocalizing that I needed them in that moment, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I'm been mad at you. And so I knew, okay, Loryn, you can't do this on your own. So there's something you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to go to therapy, and work that out, and really get the tools necessary in order to understand that you have to process it. And the way that you process that is by allowing it in so you can process it. And so, that was a little bit of my mindset in 2015. It was just like suppress. And then in
Mm-hmm.
2019, there was no suppressing, because, sister, hi, it's me, grief. What's up? I'm going to be here whether you choose to acknowledge me or not. And I think that happens a lot of times, is that grief is here whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. We suppress it, suppress it, suppress it, suppress it, and it's still there. It's just
Right.
waiting on the right moment to be like, gotcha. So
Right. Right.
so yeah, that was the mindset.
Mm. Okay. Topic. Question, because you said something so key and vital in the beginning of how we can immaturely, not knowingly deal with grief, with alcohol and sex, how easy do you feel is for someone to gravitate towards the negativity of dealing with their grief?
It's super simple, right? Because here's the thing, there's a difference between coping and managing. And naturally, as human beings, we cope with things, we don't manage them.
Mm,
And so I had an episode, like my last episode, I had a doctor on, Dr. Kurt, amazing doctor, and we talked about the grief of a living parent. And we talked about the difference between coping and managing. Coping is just getting a temporary fix for the moment to suppress whatever that feeling is so you don't have to acknowledge it. Managing, again, is letting it in, inviting it in, being like, cool, you're here. I know what it
mhm.
is. Like,
Welcome.
welcome, hate you, welcome, feel
Right.
just good enough, and then you're able
Mhm.
to move forward in life, right? And so it's super simple because it's easy, right? And
Right.
I talked about this on the interview that I just had as well. Access, right? You have to think about access.
Mhm.
When you're a woman, I'll say specifically a beautiful woman at that, it's easy for you to call a guy up and say, come through, right? When you are 21 years old and you can go to the liquor store, it's easy for me to go and buy a handle of, Jack Daniels, vodka, whatever your vice is, right? When you live in a state where, you can go and get weed, medical marijuana, whatever, where someone
Right.
who can
Right.
get you drugs, it's easy for you to do that, right? And so it's
Mhm.
easy because of access,
Mm.
right? It's not easy to manage it because you don't want to feel like you don't want to feel bad. So this is going to make me feel good. If I go and try and manage it and invite it in, I'm going to feel even more bad. So why would I want to do that to myself? Not knowing that this is like the healthy way to do it. And eventually in life, you'll feel better. But in this moment, I want to feel good. So it's easy for me to get that because of access, right? So super,
Mhm.
super simple to cope as opposed to manage.
It kind of break down the different aspects of grief, like, some people, most people, we grow up, okay, I lost, a family member or a relative or a cousin or a family friend or whatever, but we don't sit down and have those conversations like, hey son, or hey daughter,
Mm,
that high school crush that you may like, they may not like you.
yep.
That's a form of, dealing with that can be very grieving, for a teenager. That first heartbreak, that's a grief that we don't acknowledge or we don't consider to be grief. Why do you feel that we don't do that?
I think a lot of it is that, you know, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mm,
Because in society as a whole, what we deem as grief is losing someone or losing like a large traumatic event. So I talk about this. There's a thing called disenfranchised grief. And what disenfranchised grief is griefs that society doesn't deem grievable. So that can be having an abortion, that can be a miscarriage, that can be grieving the loss of a celebrity, that can be grieving an ex from 10 years ago and you just feel, you haven't talked to them in 10 years, but you feel terrible, right? Like certain things like that, society doesn't deem as grievable. And
mm-hmm,
so we don't know to have these conversations to say, hey, son, hey, daughter, like you may get heartbroken and the feeling that you're feeling is a grief, and that's
mm-hmm,
okay. Learn how to process that, invite it in, and let's work through that because I know your feelings were hurt. I know that you love them because trust me, we've all been there, right? And we work through that. Or, again, a controversial one is having an abortion, right? Like, how are you to say that I don't get to grieve having an abortion because I chose to have an abortion, right? But that's
right.
what society deems as not
Yeah.
grievable, and that's what makes it disenfranchised grief because it's not socially acceptable and it's not connected to what grief is, right? And
Mm-hmm,
so I think a lot of that comes from that is it's just society, right? You don't know what you don't know. And of course, back in the day, we didn't have as much access to Google and different things like that. And I'll say our generation in general, we're like, no, we ask a lot of questions, right? And
right.
definitely this younger generation asking all the questions. And so,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? And so now we're having more of those conversations. Now we're being more open to saying, maybe I am grieving this. Like, this is okay for me to grieve this. This is okay for me to feel this way. Or if I lose a job or if I lose a dog or if I lose a friend, I feel like I've broken up with like a boyfriend or girlfriend, and that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm,
And so it
right.
just comes with a lack of knowledge And
Mm-hmm.
now we're in an age where we can have knowledge. And so now we're having those conversations a little more.
And how easy do you feel it is for someone to to move away from society and the society standards of grief and really focus on getting the knowledge of how to deal with the grief?
Yeah, so I want to make sure you said how easy is it for them to do that?
Hmm. Yeah, like how do you feel, or do you feel it's easy for people to pull away from the society
No,
of the society standards of grief?
no. Because it's a taboo topic. Because who's going around the dinner table like, so what are you grieving today? Nobody, right? You know what I mean? Like that's not a
Right.
conversation at hand. And so how would you know unless you know? How would you
Yeah.
know unless you're having conversations about it? How would you know unless you're listening to my podcast? How would you know unless you're looking at this live right now that Jazz is doing,
Hmm.
right? How would you know those things? So it's not and I think the thing is easy and hard is relative, right? It goes back to just knowing that you can do that and it's okay. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter if society is like, you can't do this and you can't feel this way. Cool story, bro, because I'm still going to feel this way and I'm still going to do this, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I'm going to do what I need to do to become a healthy and whole human,
Hmm.
whether you feel some type of way about it or not, because I'm going to be whole. And whether you choose to be broke or not, sis is over here still whole. Thank you, though, for
Mm.
your time.
Mm. Speaking of, being the whole aspect of being whole, and being whole alone, whether you're with somebody or without somebody. How, okay, when going, and that's grieving, a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
a loss of a relationship, or whatever the case may be. In that aspect of that grief, what is, how can I'm trying to see how can I ask that question, because there's so many, like, as a woman, okay, as a woman,
Uh-huh.
we in there, oh man, that's my king, and he make me feel so
Mm-hmm.
warm and fuzzy. Well, baby, I don't, this is not gonna work for me. I want to see other people.
Right.
As that woman, what are some things that that you think she should do to cope with that grieving, period in her life? Should she how long should she grieve, or is there a time limit on grief?
No. So I think that's the misconception, or I know that's the misconception, is that grief has no timeline. Depending on what type of grief is a lifelong journey, right? Um, and as far as like a relationship, you can grieve the relationship and be in another relationship, right? You won't necessarily
Mm,
grieve that relationship, but you might grieve who you were in that relationship. I've
wow.
seen plenty of like married people or people in a long term relationship grieve who they were prior to this relationship, right? Even a lot of people don't talk about it. I know somebody probably about to get mad, but a lot of mothers grieve who they were before being a mother, right?
Mm-hmm,
Even
mm-hmm,
same thing about fathers. They
mm-hmm,
may grieve who they were before being a
mm-hmm.
father, right? And
Yeah.
so it's not necessarily you're grieving the relationship, you're grieving that person who you were. Maybe when you were in this relationship, y'all you were spontaneous and you were doing this and you were traveling, right? And now you're in this relationship, you're settled down, maybe you have kids, or maybe you don't have kids. Maybe your partner is not necessarily that spontaneous person
And
who
your
you were
thrill is
with.
going to Kroger.
Right. But right, you know what I'm saying? Like you like,
Like,
yes,
ooh,
it's
I'm going
yes.
grocery shopping. Let's go.
I got a
Cucumbers on
wine
sale.
tasting at Kroger.
Right.
Right? So like that is your judge, right? Because you know that this person who you were in a past relationship with wasn't no good, was terrible. Yes, they were spontaneous, but y'all was about to get locked up every 2 seconds. Like just terrible human. But you were
Right.
spontaneous and you were fun and you were free and you were all these things, right? And
Mm,
now that's not who you are anymore. Even though that's not necessarily like who you want to be, like you want to be with this person, you want more stability, you want more protection, right? But still that fun, amazing, wild situation, like you're
right.
grieving that. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that spills into your relationship and you start to resent your partner, or you see a lot of times people cheat and certain things like that, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
there's no timeline to it. It's a lifelong journey. And the thing about it is to your original point is you don't cope with that. If you cope with it, that's what's going to bring, you're going to bring that into your next relationship, right? You're going to bring that resentment, you're going to bring that I wish you were this person, you're going to bring all of that. So you have to manage it. So you have to allow that to come in and say, you know what, like, yes, I was spontaneous and wild and crazy, Loryn, when I was with Joe over here, right? But Joe wasn't no
Come
good.
on,
Joe
Joe.
was bad. Right. Think about you, right? Joe was bad. Joe was garbage. He was a terrible human being, right? But now when I'm with Tommy, now with Tommy, he's giving me stability. He's giving me protection. He's giving me security. He's giving me
Mm-hmm.
everything that I need, right? But
Right,
I
right.
do miss that part of Loryn. So let me bring that in. You know, how can I work through that instead of lashing out at Tommy and getting mad at Tommy or getting mad at my kids? Oh, you're just having a moment that you wish you were having a moment of spontaneity. And now you can have a real conversation with your husband or your spouse or excuse me, your partner, whoever, to say like, you know, I miss this part of me. Like, how can we incorporate that into the relationship? Maybe we can be more spontaneous with our date nights. Maybe we can be more spontaneous in the bedroom, whatever it is, right?
Right,
But
right.
you have to, the only way you can have those conversations if you allow those moments to come in and not be like, oh, well, I can't do that. No, allow it to come in like, dang,
Mm-hmm.
I wish this was a moment when I was doing this. I'm not mad at Tommy. I'm mad that this is what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's, you
So
gotta
do
gotta
so
let
do
it
you
in.
feel that's kind of like taking, like, being accountable or recognizing, where you are right now within yourself in that moment?
Yeah, I think just self-awareness. And I
Mm-hmm.
understand that everyone doesn't have self-awareness. Well, let me
Yeah.
not say that. Let me take that back. I think everyone has self-awareness. I think you just have to tap into how deep your self-awareness goes. Like I told
Mm.
you before, like I knew, like when I was lashing out, when I was sitting in the dark by my, when I knew, I'm like, oh, you can't do this on your own, right? A lot of people wouldn't do that. A lot of people would just like stay in that place and be like, nope, I'm just depressed, and I'm like, no, I need to go to therapy because I
Yeah.
cannot do this on my own, right? And
Yeah.
so you can choose, you can decide how self-aware you want to be, right? Some people just like live in a world of oblivion because it's easy for them, because it's like, I don't want to take responsibility, I don't want to take accountability, and being self-aware means you have to be accountable. And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't like to be held accountable, even if
Yeah.
it's with themselves,
Right.
right?
Especially when it's with themselves. It's like we always look at, who can I blame for what is going wrong in my life right now?
Yep,
Who can I blame for what happened to me so that I don't have to take any kind of responsibility for the actions that I played
that's
in
right.
that moment,
That's right.
Um and okay, just kind of switching it a little bit. Church grief. Church grief. On the topic of, is you need to have a therapy, you recognize that you needed therapy.
Correct.
You recognize that you couldn't do this on your own, and excuse me for all my church goers, I am an avid church goer every Sunday. I love
As
God with
am
all
I.
my heart. Amen.
What's that? Saved but not soft, baby.
Say but not soft. Plug Jesus Child, runfromsin.com. Make sure you get your shirt. All right. um Dealing with church grief, and you know how they say, just pray about it. Go talk to the pastor, or go talk to the first lady, or whatever the case may be, however you're told. Why is it important for one to understand that it is okay to love God and still have a therapist?
Absolutely. Like that's the phrase right there. I love God and I love therapy.
Yeah.
Like that's it, right? Because if you think about it, like you said, pray about it. Yes,
Yeah.
you can pray about it. You should pray about it, right?
Right.
But in a moment, in for me specifically, in that moment of grief when I realized I couldn't do it on my own, I can pray to
Mm-hmm.
God, because what am I saying to you? You just took my dad from me when I just begged you to keep him alive,
Ooh.
cried and begged for you to keep him alive, and a week later he died. What are we talking about, right?
Yeah.
So in that moment, I could not pray. But if I think about it from a logical standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about talking to the first lady, talking to the pastor, talking
Yes.
to the deacon, whoever, right? These are
Yeah.
all humans. These are all
Yeah.
people who
Yeah.
God is sending a message through. So
Right.
why wouldn't God use a therapist to do the same thing, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Why is it because they're not in the church doesn't mean that you can't talk to them. That these are trained individuals who God gave a gift to, right?
Mhm.
Who gave the
Mhm.
gift of being able to listen, and the gift of patience, getting the gift of discernment, right? So why would you not use this vessel that God has put on this earth to help you, right? Because this is what happens a lot of times. Again, avid Christian over here. Everybody knows Father, Son, Holy Spirit, what to do, baby, right?
Amen.
But what happens a lot of times is we'll be like, God, please, I just need help. Please help me, God. Please, please, please help me, God, right? And
Mhm.
then, a therapist will come and be like, no, God, please help me. I always think about that verse in the Bible. And I think me and you had talked about it.
Mhm.
And, they're out on the water. They're like, God, please help me. And he's like, okay, just come to me. Okay. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then he coming out in the water. He's like, cool, 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 cool. He looked down, he's sinking. He's like, what are you doing? Like,
Right.
I gave you, like, I told you, like, I'm helping you, right?
I told you what to do.
I'm helping you. Or even if you think about when he was sleeping in the boat, right? He was sleeping in the boat,
Mhm.
storm is going on around him. They're like, God, help me, Jesus, right? He they wake him up. He's like, what are y'all even waking me up for? Stop. And it
Right.
stops, right? Like he's like, I already gave you everything you needed. Like I think a lot of times we as Christians and as faith-based people is we pray to God and we're like, God, please give me, God, I need help. God, I need this, I need that. And God has already given you everything you needed. He's already given you all the resources you needed. And so why are we trying to like beg him to give us something? It's like God will give you a sign. He'll send somebody in your life and you're like, God, give me a sign. He'll send a therapist. Okay, God, not that sign. I didn't mean that. Like, can you give me another sign, right? That I'm good.
Right.
And he's like, I've literally given you everything you need. You're asking me for the same thing over and over when I've already given you that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's anything wrong with like praying and going to that. But like a lot of times we look to our pastors and first ladies and deacons to be our pastor, to be our therapist, to be our financial manager, to be all of these things. Right. And that is not what they are there for. They are there for a specific purpose. Right. And a lot of people
Mhm.
do have multiple talents, but that's not everybody's talent. Right. And
Right.
so it's okay to step outside of the church and go and get a trained professional who is Christian based. Get you a Christian based therapist. I had a two Christian based therapists, and they use Bible verses in a lot of our sessions, right?
Mhm.
So that will make you feel comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like because that was something that I really meant a lot to me. Like I don't want you coming
Yeah.
to me, talking about stones and all that stuff. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like but that's not what
What
I
a
need.
right.
That's not what
Right.
I needed in my journey, right? I
Yeah.
need I
Understandable.
need from the word, I need it to make
Yeah.
sense. Like that's
Right.
what I need. So it's okay to step outside the church and do that because just like God sends pastors and deacons and all that stuff, he does the same for therapists as well.
True. That is so true. And I hope y'all heard that here. If you feel like you need therapy, go get it. Don't, not and still you can say, hey, Pastor, I got a therapist.
Correct.
I'm getting counseling. I need someone that's, not biased, that doesn't know me personally,
That's
that
right.
I can be open and vulnerable with. Not saying that you can't be open and vulnerable with, your leaders at church, but sometimes you have to go outside of who knows you to get catches a new perspective. There you go. You know what I mean? So, and just plug that out there. And so, insert this Two Shall Suck podcast. What has that journey been like? With now being in over 40 countries. Okay. I did plug that in there because I
She
did say
did.
37, but I left off 6 in counting. What has this journey been like on this Two Shall Suck podcast?
Man, it's been super fulfilling. It's been super fulfilling, and it is something that I didn't know that I needed, right? Um, you know, if again, being somebody who's super faith-based, God is funny, right? Because like I told you, like when dad passed, like I didn't talk to God for a long time because what
Yeah,
what conversation are we having, right? But
right.
he knew that eventually I'd come
Mhm.
back because we always do.
Right.
And he really is the one who gave me the vision. I always tell the story like at 3:30 in the morning, right at the brink of COVID, like right when it first we were going into
Mhm.
quarantine and all
Mhm.
that. It was 3:30 in the morning, woke me up and was like, I need you to write. And I'm like, dude, I'm tired. I'm not really trying to do this right now. And he's like, yeah, cool, just write. And I just started writing on all these topics and started
Mhm.
writing, looking up different grief podcasts and just all this stuff, right? And I knew I wanted to do something with grief at the beginning of
Mhm.
2020.
Right.
And I have a background in events, right? I have
Yeah.
2 degrees, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like to do
Mhm.
events. And so I'm like, cool, I'm going to do grief events. I'm going to bring in, life insurance, people, and I'm going to, all this stuff, right?
Right.
In comes COVID. Yeah, you thought.
Mm.
So, God's like, no, I need you to do this. And I was like, yeah, no. And, but I did it. I was obedient, got up, wrote all that stuff. And a month later, I launched the podcast. And it was funny. I always tell people, when I got the vision, when he gave it to me, I was like, God, you have the audacity to tell me to help people to heal when I'm healing from my own grief myself. Make it make sense to me, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
he made it make sense. He's made it make sense because it's been not only healing for other people, but it's really been healing for me. And
Mhm.
it's funny because a lot of people are always like, how are you're in this space of grief work all the time. How do you even like I would imagine you would stay in that grief, right?
Mhm.
But by talking about it, by discussing it more and learning more about it, it's helped me to process my own grief and to be able to move forward in life. And I still have my moments. Like,
Right.
I'm not, again, grief is a lifelong journey, right? The holidays are coming up. These times are always hard for me and my siblings, right? Like, I'm here
Mhm.
in Atlanta, and we have to go to different places because we don't do that, because you knew that. Don't play with me. So don't play with me. So, like, we always have to go to different places to celebrate now, right? Because we don't
Right.
have the family home. Like, we had to sell that, and just different things. And so it's been the process, it's been mind blowing. And I always tell people it has to be of God, because my biggest thing when I first started and even now was, if I can help one person heal from their grief or in their grieving journey, I've done what I needed to do. And I've done that, and it's now in 43 countries. It's close to 11,000 downloads. It's, sponsors are talking about trying to get on. Like, the amount of messages that I get on Instagram, in my emails, on YouTube every single day. Like, I always like text my friend. I'm like, bruh, like, I just cry every single day, because the amount of people who are like, thank you, has been just overwhelming and heartwarming. And I know it's of God, because he's allowed me to heal in the process and help others heal. And that is the goal, is to have people who are healed and whole in this world, because there's a lot of us who are not.
Yeah. That is so key nowadays, is getting to the point to where you can know that you can be whole on your own, and it doesn't take a thing, an individual, or a situation to make you whole.
That's right.
You have to get back to the whole individual that you were created to be. And it is a journey, it is a test. It can be aggravating, it can be
Mhm.
frustrating, it can be sad, but in the end, it is worth it.
That's right.
It is all worth it.
It's worth it.
And every single second, and you look back over the journey of going through your grief, dealing with childhood issues, different things like that. You look over your journey and you sit in awe, and you're like, I made it through all of that. Now look at where I am. What has been your mindset as of lately, with on this grief journey and helping so many people in so many countries? Like, what are you looking to do going forward from where you are right now?
Just continuing to help people, continuing to grow, right? Because again, I always tell people, I'm like, I'm just out here, just really being myself, really just trying to, like, when I think about my listeners, I think about, what did I need in the moment when I didn't have it? And that's the content that I create. Those are the episodes that I create, right? Like, I think about the conversations that people have, and I'm like, oh, you didn't know that was grief. I'm about to have a conversation about it, right? Like those moments when people are feeling some type of way, or they're like, I don't really know how to like, I don't really know what this is, right? Like those are the conversations that I want to have. And so really, honestly, Jazz, I just want to keep just growing and helping people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I want to keep getting into more countries. I want to keep getting more listeners. I want to keep growing my loves is what I call them, my little community. You know, I want to keep growing that. Like I just my biggest thing that I've seen and that I always tell people is that I never want you to feel alone in this journey, because although grief, um, you're not alone, it can be lonely because you're the one who's experiencing the emotions. You're the one having to remember the loss over and over. You're the one who has to do that, right? And so I don't want anyone to ever feel like they don't have a safe space to be able to grieve properly because the world tells them it's not safe. Because a lot of times with grief, you don't feel safe, you don't feel seen, and you don't feel heard. And so I
Right.
want to create that space where all of those things happen, because there was a space. I didn't have a space to do that outside of therapy, right? But as soon as I go outside of the doors, I'm back into a world where I'm not seen, I'm not heard, I'm not safe, and all these things happen. And so I just want to keep creating a space for those who are grieving, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
to know that they're not alone, and I do see them and I do hear them.
What has been some perspectives that you have found out on, the journey of This Too Shall Suck podcast, going through your grieving moments? What have been some new perspectives that you discovered that you didn't know necessarily?
Well, that's a good one. So much, because I've talked to so many different people, right? Um, that, and I know this sounds cliche, but it's the truth, that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And nobody has to validate that. So, kind of to piggyback off that nobody needs to validate your feelings for them to be valid,
Mm,
right? Because I think a lot of times we look for validation of like, is it okay to feel this way? Should I feel this way? What happens if I feel this way, right? Because a lot of times, again, the world says it's not okay. And so we look for that validation a lot of times unknowingly, because the world says it's not okay. So I don't think this is okay. But the way that you feel is valid, no matter if anyone validates it or not. So
mm-hmm.
that's something that I had to learn a lot of times, and something that I learned, triggers, right? I didn't know really what triggers were. I didn't understand that like something as simple as somebody calling me dramatic can trigger me in a way that would send me into a tizzy, right?
Mm,
Or go somebody else's uh, I don't want to say somebody close, but somebody close of close, to me can be a trigger that I can't go to certain funerals, right? Because it's
right.
triggering. Or if I do go to a funeral, there's certain activities I can't be a part of, right? So really, like, and I know again these are simple things, but I didn't know because
Mm-hmm.
what conversation am I having about grief, right?
Right.
Um, and really again just the difference between managing and coping, I had to understand that, because we always talk about coping but we don't really talk about this managing piece. We're like,
Mm-hmm.
I've coped with my grief, and it's like, you shouldn't cope with it, you should manage it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you don't know the difference, if you don't know that there's a difference, then you don't you're not going to know the difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say those are the three biggest things: is there's a difference between managing and coping, that my feelings are valid no matter if anyone validates them or not, and that triggers are real, and I need to learn how to recognize them,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't get it right. I don't, and let me be very clear. As much as I am in this world, I don't get it right 100% of the time, because who does, right?
Right.
Um, but those are the three biggest things that I would say I've learned in this journey.
Yeah. That's powerful in itself, especially the one where you were saying that you don't need anyone to validate how you feel for your feelings to be valid, because we often as people we look for confirmation
Yeah.
of sadness with other people. We
Yep.
look for, someone to tell me it's okay for me to cry,
Mm-hmm.
someone to tell me it's okay to be heartbroken, and you don't just go through it. You know what I mean? This is how I feel, okay, I'm sad that I broke my glass, vase. I'm sad
Right.
about it. I'm hurt about it. Why? Because my mama gave me that vase, and
Correct.
she gave it to me when I was 6, and she wrapped it up and held it for me until I became an adult. And
Yeah.
now it's gone. It's little things like that that you don't have to own up to or explain anything to anybody.
That's right.
You just have to be comfortable enough to know that, okay, this is how I feel right now. Now, how do I deal with it? What's the next step? I've
Mm-hmm.
acknowledged the feeling. I've acknowledged, where I am right now mentally. What's the next step going forward?
Yeah.
How do I start? Okay, how do I handle that? How do I notice what triggers I have? Um, and you said something that kind of brought up another question for me. Triggers. How easy is it to miss your triggers?
Oh, very. Especially if you don't know what they are, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how would you know what they are if you haven't had the training to know what they are? And when I
Mm-hmm.
say training, therapy, you know what I mean? Any type of counseling to know what they are, right? So it's easy for you to miss them. Because again, something as small as I remember vividly. I had a conversation with someone, and they were like, "Stop being dramatic," and like I literally immediately felt some type of way, like, "Who's being dramatic?
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nobody being dramatic. Like, what are you even talking?" Like was just
Right.
my head's like, "Go, bill," and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"What is the problem?" And so like I had to stop and think about it. I'm like, "Oh, you don't like when they call you dramatic because of a situation when you were a child that somebody called you that and then this happened afterwards, right?" And so I
Mm-hmm.
had to go back and have a conversation with that person to say, I'm sorry that like my whole energy changed. Like I realized in that moment I was triggered by you saying a word because of a situation that happened in the past. It's not your fault, it's just something I have to work through, right? Or like again, my friend's dad passed away, and when he passed away, I went to her that same day, but a lot of the activities like helping get pictures together and all those things that I would typically do, I could not
Mm-hmm.
do because
Right.
it was very triggering for me and took me back to like my dad, and I was like,
Right.
yeah, I can't do that. Like I couldn't go to the graveyard with her. I was like, I'll just go to the house and set up for the repast. Like there's certain things now that I'm like, yeah, no. But again, that's because I have the training to know to say, in this moment, you're the easiest way to recognize a trigger is pay attention to your body.
Mm.
If you get triggered, pay attention to your body. See, remember how that feels. Like, do you start breathing heavy? Does your chest get heavy? Do you get hot? Do you start sweating? Do you immediately start going into a tizzy? Do you get irritated? Do you get mad? Right? Like, pay attention to your body and pay attention to your mood. That's how you know that's a trigger. And the
Mm.
biggest thing, like once you know it's a trigger, now you have to figure out why it's a trigger. Like what
Wow.
is it about this that's making this a trigger, right?
Right.
And so, to answer your question, it's not easy, but if you have the proper training, it is easy.
Mm. Mm. Anything is possible with the proper training.
Correct.
And
Correct.
not know and understanding that you don't have to take this journey by yourself. You just have to connect with someone that you can trust, that can lead you through these things, through these
Correct.
triggers, through these emotions, through this mindset. It is so key with finding, okay, I need therapy, not going to the first therapist that you see and saying, okay, I found my therapist.
Correct.
you know do you think that's like a situation that can be considered as a grief situation as well, looking for the right therapist?
Yeah, because it could be depending on how it is, right? So, um, some people get it right on the first time. Some people have a therapist and they're like, "This is my therapist. I love him." That wasn't my
Mm-hmm.
story. It took me um, two therapists, and then I finally got to the third one. I loved her, but she could only take me so far, and then I knew I had to get a therapist who looked like me, so I didn't have to explain my experiences, right? But that can you can cause a grief, you can cause a grief within yourself at any time, but
Mhm.
definitely in trying to find a therapist, right? Because you might go to a therapist, you're like, all right, they're cool, like I right, and it might not work
Yeah.
out. So you're like,
Right.
okay, well, let me go to another one. It didn't work out. So now you're like, well, maybe it's just me. Like maybe I'm just broken and I'm not meant to be fixed, or maybe all these therapists suck, or maybe I'm just supposed to be depressed, right? So now you've created this narrative in your head of who you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be and what
Yeah.
therapy is, and
Yeah.
that's not the case, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so like I would say, like when you are looking for a therapist, there's a few things you need to look for. You need to look for, when you're looking for a therapist, someone who identifies with who you uniquely are, right? So say you are like, I'm a black woman, right? And so my first therapist was not a black woman. She was a white woman, older white woman, but I knew I wanted someone who was Christian. She was a Christian counselor. And so again, goes back to, I want someone who's Christian and I want a woman,
Mhm.
right? And then I recognize like, okay, she got me through that heavy part of grief, but I do want a black woman who resonates with me, my cultural experiences, and I don't really, have to go into detail. And so I did that, right? And so like whoever you uniquely are, so whether you are, you could be a black person, you can be white, you can be queer, you can be binary, whatever, like you can be whatever, someone who understands that and specializes in that. So when you're going to look for therapists, when you're reading their bio, you can see what their specialty is, right?
Right.
Me, I have a perfectionism complex, right? And
Mm.
so my second therapist, she specialized in people who have perfectionism complexes, right?
We talked
It's,
about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so,
Mhm.
I knew, cool, like she can help me break this because
Yeah.
it is crippling sometimes, and I need someone who can specifically work through that. So, someone who uniquely identifies with you, someone who specializes in what you are going through, whether it is grief, whether it is depression, whether it is relationships, whether it's whatever it is, right? I would say that. And then the third thing is think about your where you want to, I say think about where you want to be in, I would say 90 days, right? Because that
Mhm.
first really 30 to 60 days of therapy is really key, because you're probably going to be going every week, or you're going to be going every other week depending on,
Mhm.
budget and things like that. But
Mhm.
that's when you're really going to get that breakthrough. So give yourself time. So I would say, like, if in the first two sessions, if you're like, well, I don't feel anything, I'm not changing, give it some time, because you have to understand that when you go to therapy, they have to peel back all these layers that you've been holding on to, that you've never shown anyone your whole
Right.
life. And so they're
Right.
not going to come in and like take the knife and, like, you know what I mean, like just
Mhm.
like they're just not going to do that. They're going to
Right.
peel back, and you're like, why are you asking me about this? Like, okay, like, no, like they got to peel back those layers, right? And I
Yeah.
had a conversation with somebody, he was like, well, I just feel like my therapist, she just like what did she say, what did he say? He said she doesn't tell me what I need to do. And I said, well, a good therapist is never going to tell you what to do. They're going
What
to
to
ask
do.
you the
Yeah.
questions so you can figure out what to do. I said, that's a good therapist. A good therapist is not going to be like, you need to do this. I said, so
Right.
you probably actually need a better therapist. No
Yeah.
shade to your therapist, but
Right.
you need a better one, because if she's just telling you what to do, clearly it hasn't been working, because you clearly still screwed up based off our conversation. So, like, you probably need to go find another one, and it probably needs to be a man, because you just want this woman because she gonna tell you what you want to hear, and you need a man to gather your spirit on that. Okay, and sometimes
Ooh.
you know if you need somebody who's gonna politely wrap you up,
Yeah. Yeah.
or if you
Yeah.
need somebody a
And
little,
put a bow on you. Mhm.
or if you need somebody a little more gentle to bring you on in, you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't be like, oh, well, I just no. You need somebody who's gonna politely gather you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Politely is a key
Yeah.
word. And some people don't need them polite. Some people need it real to the point. That's not me.
Right.
That's not me. I need you to
Exactly.
politely gather me, please.
So
Politely
just
gather
a
me.
couple of more questions for that person that is looking to start their own podcast, because you have skyrocketed in such a phenomenal way.
Crazy.
What would be your advice to that person?
Just do it. Just start it. What's the You know what? It's funny when people come to me. So now I help millennials create a podcast,
Yes.
and turn their
Plug.
downloads into dollars. Plug. So, even if you don't have a large following. So I would just say just start it. Like, it's so funny when people are like, "Oh, I want to start a podcast." Da, 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 da. I'm like, "Okay, we'll start it." They're like, "Well, I don't know how." And I'm like, "There's a deeper reason because we are in a world of Google. You can literally Google how to start a podcast. You can literally Google how to start a podcast. There are so many websites, so many articles, so many this. I literally give tips all the time in my email list and on my Instagram and
Mm-hmm.
Facebook of things you
Mm-hmm.
need to do to start a podcast. So, what
Mm-hmm.
is the real reason that you won't start a podcast? Is it you're afraid? A lot of people are afraid. Who's
Right.
going to listen to me? I don't know how to do it. Okay, cool. Like, you're worried about the wrong things because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, if you're there's a couple people who start a podcast. There's the one person who wants to start a podcast because it's a trend, because it's trendy right now, right?
Yeah.
It's cool to
Yeah.
start a podcast. Everybody got a podcast. There's you know what I mean? Like there's podcast challenges going on. Like there's a
Right.
lot. It's trendy right now to start a
Right.
podcast. It's the
Exactly.
cool thing to do, right? So you have that person who just wants to start a podcast because it's trendy. They want to make money. They want the clout, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a second person who I work with who wants to start a podcast because they have an authentic voice and they have a story and a message that they want to get out there, and they're chasing the impact and they're not chasing the money. They're not
Yeah.
chasing that, right? And
Yeah.
so like if you're that person, then the only thing that's stopping you is you.
Mm-hmm.
You're afraid. You feel like nobody's going to listen to you. You don't know how to start. You don't know what equipment to get, which again, we're in the age of Google. So I'm going to go on to take that one away, right? Oh, well, I can't, I don't have proper English, or I don't have a good radio voice, or again, what are we even talking about? Because who you
Right.
hear now is who you're going to hear in a podcast. Like the reason that my podcast is successful is because I'm authentic. I'm not
Yeah.
changing my verbiage. I'm not changing my voice. Like this is
Right.
my voice. Like it's kind of deep. It is what it is. Y'all gonna deal with it or you're not. I mean, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, the message is going to get to who it's supposed to get to. And the message is going
Right.
to be for who it's supposed to be for. And so for that person who's like, oh, I want to start a podcast, I want you to really, really dig deep and really understand what it is that's stopping you. And if it's
Mm-hmm.
fear, okay, let's work through that fear. If it's
Right.
if it's okay, I'm not scared. I really think that people are going to listen, but I really, really don't. I really, really don't know what equipment to buy. Okay, cool. Let's work through that. Like, but I guarantee it's not about that equipment to buy because you can literally go on Google. You can listen to podcasts about podcasts. I can
Mm-hmm.
be your coach. Like, there's ways for you to do that. So, like,
Right.
it 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, it's the
Mm-hmm.
fear of
Yeah.
not knowing what's going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing that, and I know this is lengthy, I'm sorry, but
Mm-mm, you're
um
fine.
when you're doing that, when you have that fear of, is anyone going to listen, it goes back to what I said originally. My main thing with this podcast is if it helps one person heal in their grieving journey, I've done what I needed to do. So you
Right.
need to check your intentions. You need to
Mhm.
check what it is that you want to do, and you need to check if you really want to share your story, you want to make impact, or if you're just trying to jump on it for the trend.
Right. Because I'm gonna tell you, on my podcast, the Fly Show, I do it from a cell phone and the mic on my phone. Like I don't have this fancy get up or none of that. Like starting out, I had my cell phone and the app that I did my podcast on. And as
Right.
I grew, then I pulled out that ring light and got me a little mic. I ain't gonna tell you what kind, but I got one. You know what I mean? But it doesn't take a lot for you to just start. It just take the mindset to do it and just go out there. And whoever is meant for it to land on it, they're going to get it.
That's
So you
right.
just have to be consistent with it. You just have to give yourself enough mindset and give yourself enough credit to know that you can do what you put your mind to do.
That's right. And I'm gonna tell you a little secret. See, this is something that I share in my profitable podcast playbook, but I'm gonna share it with you.
Come on,
To her
plug.
point, right? Plug. to her point of, so a couple points that you made there. So you don't have to have a lot to start. That is very true. This mic that I have, hello, this mic that I have is maybe $15. I'm currently again in Georgia, so I put all of my podcast equipment in a suitcase and brought it down. I don't have a fancy camera. My ring light is off to the side right here. I'm in my brother-in-law's office looking crazy. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
we're here, right? And I have a
Right.
podcast episode to record, and I'm gonna record it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, there's this misconception that you have to have all these things, right? And at the end of the day, you do want to do things in excellence, but at the same time, if you're like, I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna wait, you're never gonna get started, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing to her point about being consistent, a lot of people are like, I don't have time to post every day. I can't do that. I can't do that. Listen, be consistent, whatever works for you. So when I originally started podcasting, I dropped an episode every other week. Now I drop episodes weekly, right?
Yeah.
Now
Every
my
Thursday.
every Thursday I got a new one coming out tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So dang, we're about to be episode 6. So we halfway through the
Yeah.
season. What I do?
Mm-hmm.
And so do whatever is consistent for you, right? Again, that's the misconception. Is like, I don't have time to post every day, or I don't have time to do this every day. No, be consistent. If you drop every other week, then drop every other week. If you're going to drop on Monday, drop on Monday. If for some reason you can't drop that day, keep your listeners engaged and let them know why you did it. There was a time when I was out the country and I tried to upload my episode. It would not upload. And I'm like, bruh, are you kidding me? So I got on my Instagram and I was like, hey, y'all, an episode was supposed to drop today. I'm in Mexico. It's not uploading. I'm going to give you 2 next week, right? And you just like let people know, right? Because people are
Right.
going to be like, ready for an episode now.
Yeah.
And now what? Now you out here looking 10 types of crazy, right?
Right.
And so just be consistent in whatever that is for you. So don't get caught up in the hype of what these gurus say. Don't get caught up in the hype of you got to have all this stuff, because I still don't have all this stuff. And I'm still in 43 countries, and I still am about to hit 11,000 downloads. And I don't even have that many episodes. And that's not even to say it in a braggadocious way. It's to say it in a way of like, again, my concern is the content and getting it out there to the people who need it.
Yeah.
Anyone else who feels or doesn't feel a way about it has nothing to do with me. That got
Right.
everything to do with them.
Right.
So don't get in your head about it. Don't get in your
Yeah.
head about it.
And that's what these young kids say. That's on Mary
And
Had a
that's
Little
on,
Lamb.
I was gonna say that's on period.
Well, that
Is that what they
too.
say?
Her too. That
Her
period.
too. Whatever she
Right.
said.
Her too. Right. So in closing, Mom, tell us, how do we follow you on social media? What do you have coming up? What are you working on now? And all of that great stuff.
All the things. So you can follow me on all the socials. So I have like 27 socials. No, I'm just kidding. I do have a lot of socials. So my podcast page, you can follow me at This Too Shall Suck Podcast. That's 2 O's, at This Too Shall Suck Podcast. That's on Facebook. That's on LinkedIn. That is on Instagram. Look, I was about to say Twitter. I don't have Twitter because I don't have the capacity. So yeah, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, at This Too Shall Suck Podcast. Also, if you want to follow me for more tips on podcasting, you can actually follow my personal Instagram. That's at Loryn Denise, LORYNDENISE. And if you are a millennial who is looking to create a podcast and turn those downloads into dollars, even if you don't have a large following, you can head over to profitablepodcastplaybook.com. You can just enter your name and email, and I will send you the 3 strategies that millennials like myself and others are using to do that. So again, that's profitablepodcastplaybook.com. And yeah, let's make an amazing impact. Like, make an impact. Like, don't be out here just chasing the bag. Chase the impact. Don't chase the bag.
Okay, and what is it? You said
profitablepodcastplaybook.com. Yeah.
profitablepodcastplaybook.com.
Come on, typing.
Because we go.
Why she got her face in there?
Boom.
Hey, boom.
Well, I had that.
Right.
Let me plug that real quick. For those of you that did not get that, make sure you go to profitablepodcastplaybook.com and go and get the playbook from Miss Loryn.
Look, Christian trying to come. Christian
Yeah,
trying to
that's
come in.
Christian.
There go my nephew. He talking about, what up, dude? Tell him to go get the playbook, Christian. Christian said, go get the playbook, okay?
He was like, "Y'all heard my mama, you heard my auntie. Go get that
Get the
playbook
playbook.
because y'all need
Okay.
that podcast because we got lives to change around here in these streets."
We
All
got
right,
lives to
you
change.
heard it from the 2-year-old himself that came in here and plugged that in. Look,
He did.
as
He
you know,
did.
and look, as you know, I'm a mama, I'm a wife before I'm anything else. So if you hear
A
my
tuh.
2-year-old run by, close your ears and just ignore it and keep going. All right, but thank you so much, Ms. Loryn, for giving us your time. Thank you so much for being on National Entrepreneur Month show. I get tongue tied on my own show,
I
y'all.
know. It's so
But
quick. You go so quick. You gotta slow
I
down, baby.
know, right? Slow down
Where
just a little
where
bit.
where you going, honey? Where you going?
Off of here in about 2 more minutes.
That's
Look.
fair. Yeah, because I am
But
hungry.
thank you all so much for everyone that tuned in. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night. Catch me back here with our final episode of this week for National Entrepreneur Month show. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your night. Good night, everybody. Love ya.